the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda? If not, we'll move then to agenda item number 2, which is to consider the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting that was held on December 17, 2019. The council does have the minutes. Are there any corrections to note?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and a motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 3. This is the first of 2 public hearings that we'll have this evening. Agenda item number 3 is a public hearing on the vacation of a utility easement in the Carr Subdivision 1. So we'll have the public hearing on the resolution granting the, as well as acting on granting the resolution to vacate the utility easement. The next agenda item is also a similar item, just a different location on vacation. So I will call on City Engineer, Public Works Director Glenn Olson to conduct this public hearing, and you may want to cover both topics in your discussion. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, Carr Subdivision 1 is a subdivision that was created several years ago with the expectation of single-family homes or the combination of platted lots. In this specific case, there is an easement for utilities that was located between 2 platted lots. And since that time, the developer has indicated that he'd rather have larger units placed over the lot lines. There are no public utilities within that easement, or private utilities, but no utilities within that existing easement, and they've requested to have it relocated to the new property line for development purposes. We did check with all the utilities. There are no utilities in that area. The replacement easement has been granted by the owner and will be recorded shortly. So the motion that we make today will not be subject to that easement because it's already there. So we would recommend approval of the vacation.
Are there any comments as part of the public hearing, either from the council or members of the audience? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 4. This would be that vacation of the utility easement in Carr Subdivision 1. This would be the consideration of the resolution granting the petition. Questions?
Move the resolution granting the petition.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and motion does pass. Agenda item number 5, consider the authorization to purchase the new Zamboni for the Red Baron Arena and Expo Center. Sharon, are you going to introduce this, and then Preston?
Mr. Mayor and Council, Preston Stensrud, Parks Superintendent, will present information on the authorization to purchase the new Zamboni.
Welcome, Preston.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we have action item to replace the existing oldest Zamboni out at the Red Baron Arena. And just to give you a little background, when we were doing construction of the arena, staff chose to offset the purchase of two new Zambonis, so that at their life expectancy, we weren't buying $250,000 Zambonis at a time. So we came with an alternative to purchase this Zamboni that was 16 years old at the time, for as half price of a new one. With the being electric Zamboni, we're now at where the batteries have about a 5-year lifespan. We're getting battery readings on them now. And then the conditioner unit itself, the bearings and stuff are getting wore, they're noisy. It's going to be time to put a lot of money into it if we don't do something. It's a 1999 model, which Jim pointed out or called me earlier today. Just says in here 16-year-old, but it has 6,000 hours on it roughly. The hour meter went out when we got it, so there's a little bit of a window there, but about 6,000 hours on it. With that being said, we got a proposal from the Zamboni company out in California. And to get the Zamboni with the options that we need, which is included in the proposal, in the attached proposal, their price was $156,704.80. And that also includes a Sourcewell discount, which is similar to what the NJPA is. So you don't have to do competitive bidding or anything, which they're the only company that sells Zamboni, so there's no way to get a second price anyways. But that includes that and a delivery fee from California. So timing on this is a little crucial because the price is supposed to go up January 1st, and he held it through tomorrow for us, and then it's a 10-month window from when we order till we get the machine, so that put us in line for next hockey season. In doing that, with what we had originally budgeted and not knowing what we were going to get for trade value, I talked with the board members at Maha about a potential donation just to offset what we were going to be short from a budget standpoint. And they kind of did a counter offer back to split the cost of the Zamboni after trade. And we have a tentative agreement on that, and that'll come to the next council meeting, that full agreement. So with that, also I should mention that the Zamboni company did offer a trade value of that $22,500. But I reached out to R&R Specialties out of Somerset, Wisconsin. He came and looked at our machine, and he gave us an offer just to purchase our machine outright, as long as we'll give it to him this spring when our hockey season's over, which I said we'd be fine because we can get by with one Zamboni for summer. And he offered that $27,750, which brings us down to a net cost of $128,954.80 to be split with Maha upon the arrival of the unit. So we don't have to exchange any money until the unit is here. So, and that's pending that agreement next time. Otherwise, we would pay if we choose not to accept that agreement, then we'd pay the full price. So.
Thank you, Preston, and thank you for your extra work on this and sourcing the machine, and thank you to Maha for their participation in the cost of the net cost of covering half of the machine. So it's a nice partnership.
Yes.
We'll open up for questions to Preston. Greg?
Just some clarification so that everyone's clear on how this is working now. Maha, my understanding is that this is money that you've raised from fundraising, tournaments, and from concessions revenue, correct?
Mayor and Council, Josh Johnson with President Maha. Yeah, the revenue that we're offsetting this with is coming from tournaments, concession stand revenue, and any fundraising revenue that we have. None of this money is coming off what I call our cash balance sheet cash from old Lockwood. That still remains on our balance sheet, and we're still looking for opportunities there. But this is, when we talked last time, this is about reinvesting in Red Baron. And using those revenues from that to reinvest back into the Red Baron. And this is just one way that we can, it's a little bit bigger splash than normal on our other stuff, but we thought this was a great partnership.
And this is similar to what the association did with the replacing the sound system in the
Sound
Lockwood Arena.
systems and all that, all that stuff, scoreboards and things like that we do, that we keep track of, but same principle, yes. Yep.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Russ?
Preston, just a question, because I'm not mechanically inclined at all. The other Zamboni is a new machine that was purchased on the road. Is this one compatible? So I mean, you can share parts, or you're going to have two separate?
There's really no parts that we'd take off of it. It's the same model, but some of the technology have changed, like this machine has
More
not.
computers on nowadays, right?
Well, a little bit of that, and then this machine will have lithium-ion batteries, which will be one of the first to make this order. They just switched for the Zamboni.
And how long will those last?
15 years.
Okay.
The batteries now that are 5 years old, they're $10,000.
Okay.
So like next year, we're going to have to replace the batteries on the one we bought in 2016. It's a $12,000 option, but you get 3 life changes of batteries. That would be $30,000, sorry, because they're $10,000. So
Okay.
you pay for it up front. Also, they're maintenance-free batteries. We're now, once a week, staff goes through and tests all the batteries, adds water. We don't have to do any of that. So we'll get a little cost savings. I don't know what it'll add up to over 15 years, but
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Other questions? Jim?
I know Preston, I visited Preston on this Zamboni, I think 6-8 months ago, we were talking about this, and you had looked at leasing one even, which was not cost effective.
No. Yeah, I did.
I don't know if you
did.
remember those, I don't have those numbers.
Yeah, I checked out leasing through Zamboni, but they outsource it through a bank. 3 years of leasing was going to be like $7,800 more than buying a new Zamboni, and we're going to get 15 years out of it, so there's no economical sense to do that. And I also looked for used, like slightly used Zambonis. There just aren't any because they're so expensive, so.
Is there anybody still using the propane ones? Because that became
Yeah,
was a big
you
issue.
you
with
can
air
still,
quality.
yep, you still can use them, but the legality and all the testing is a nightmare. And actually
It's
the,
a little cheaper.
Yep.
But the cost on
Right.
the road for legality and
yep, and air monitoring
quality and air
equipment
monitoring
and,
is not
yep,
worth it.
nope. So, and they still check, actually, we had a pop-in inspection here 3 weeks ago.
Really.
Yep, and they wanted to see all of our logs. We're like, what logs? We don't have any combustible engines, so there's really nothing to monitor, so. But we battled through it, but, yeah, so it is still an option, but I don't know if they make them new propanes anymore, but
think
there's, okay. I didn't look, but yeah, I know there are still propane machines out there, though.
Any other question for Preston? If not, yeah,
Move authorization to purchase the new Zamboni for the Red Baron Arena, and thank you to Maha for your participation in this.
I'll second that.
motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move then to the consent agenda.
Do we need a recommendation on the number, no, item number 2, or are we good to just sell it?
I apologize, that should have been included in my
Okay,
motion.
sorry, just want to make sure. So,
Kyle, that's,
I'd approve that second. So.
Is the voters okay with that?
There's 2 recommendations on the agenda item, so which of you would like to make the surplus?
I make a motion that we approve the sale of the used Zamboni to R&R out of Somerset for $27,750 at the end of the season.
And I'll still second that.
motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
I think it's a great thing that we did the due diligence, and I applaud Preston for doing that, because trade-in value is good, but when you can sell it outright for more, that's better.
We'll do a voice vote on this.
We can open it up now.
You can. Any other discussion on the motion?
Well, I think it's also good before we stick 10, 12,000 into it for batteries.
Right.
And not recover that money in 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this machine is 20 years old.
Time to say goodbye.
Well, it's great. We're getting $27,000 for it to say goodbye to it, so.
Yep.
Right. So we will move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to the consent agenda, bringing the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda this evening. And they include, consider the resolution designating the official depositories for city funds for 2020, consider the resolution delegating authority to the city to make electronic fund transfers, consider the resolution designating the official newspaper, consider approval of the resolution authorizing the finance director to pay certain claims, the call for the public hearing regarding proposed property tax abatement at 1005 Channel Parkway, consider the application for exempt permit for the Lynn Firefighters Relief Association, consider the application for exempt permit for Lyon County Pheasants Forever, consider the application for exempt permit for Marshall Golf Club Incorporated, the wastewater treatment facilities. We have a payment application to Bolton and Mink wastewater treatment facilities, payment of invoice to American Engineering Testing, and then the balance of the bills and the project payments. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants to remove for purpose of separate discussion? If not, is there a motion for?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 18. Consider the approval of the amended personnel policy, Chapter 10, drug-free workplace. With us tonight, the city's Human Resources Director, Sheila Dubbs.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The city already has a drug-free workplace policy in place that complies with both Minnesota and federal regulations, but the policy that you're being asked to consider this evening is an update of our current policies, both relating to employees who hold commercial driver's license, which we call CDLs, as well as those who don't. The primary reason for the change is in the policy relates to CDL holders. There's been a recent law change that employers must now comply with. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has set up a drug and alcohol clearinghouse, which became effective on January 6th. The clearinghouse is an online database that will house driver information for those drivers that are prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions, such as operating a commercial motor vehicle due to a drug or alcohol program violation. All CDL holders will now be required across the country to register on the clearinghouse, and employers will be required to both register on the clearinghouse and run queries on new and existing employees. If a CDL holder under this clearinghouse policy has failed to comply with testing or failed to complete a rehabilitation program, the clearinghouse will house this information in the database for employers to see, and drivers will also be able to see their violation information in the database. Employers are also now required to log a driver's violations into the database. This will prevent drivers who are not compliant with the federal motor carrier rules from being able to simply go to a different state or another employer and perform in a safety-sensitive position, such as driving a motor vehicle, a commercial motor vehicle. The non-DOT policy, or the one for non-CDL holders, has also been updated. Our existing policy was about 10 years old and was in need of an update. It has a greater level of detail that informs and guides both the employer and the employee. Both of the policies that are being proposed this evening comply with state and federal laws as they are today. I utilized the policy templates for both of these as was recommended by the League of Minnesota Cities. The League worked with the law firm of Nyland, Johnson, and Lewis on their model policies. Upon approval, I will share the policy revision with all employees, both the CDL and non-CDL holders. After that, Laura and I will work with the superintendents. That would be Bob M. Moore, Dean Kudrin, and Preston Sensrud in assisting each of our current CDL holders to register on the clearinghouse. If the council has concerns with the language that's proposed in these policies, I would recommend that the council approve the policy this evening so that we do maintain legal compliance, and then we can refer it to the Personnel Committee and do further research from a legal perspective.
Thank you, Sheila. Does council have any questions? Is there a motion to approve the?
Move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting.
I've got a,
Oh,
some
you want to,
reason.
Record it for you if you'd like.
you want to verbally say how you're going to vote?
In favor.
The motion passes then unanimously. Sorry about that, John.
No, mine, it was, computer system was,
Computer guys having
You got a
computer
slow
problems.
clicker.
it was still back on the last vote, so, I don't know. But
It's operator.
it's operator error.
So we'll move then to agenda item number 19, consider the resolution for signage at 1005 North 4th Street. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a signage that had gone through a PI&T committee some time ago. It was a request from the REM House for a limitation for parking by the REM House for bus drop-offs and pickups. And so it's for a specific length of time during the day. The remaining portion of the day, it's unrestricted parking. We would recommend approval.
Any question for Glenn? If not, is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, move to a vote. Close the voting, and motion passes. We'll move to the next agenda item, agenda item number 20, the Public Works Director transition. We have a recommendation from the Personnel Committee. Sharon.
Mayor and Council, the Personnel Committee met on Monday, January 7th, to discuss the Public Works Director transition as a result of Public Works Director Glenn Olson announcing his retirement effective June 12th of 2020. And the recommendation to the Personnel Committee from the City Administrator is that would be to appoint Jason Anderson as a Public Works Director effective February 3rd, assign Glenn Olson as a City Hall owner's rep, and then fill the Assistant Engineer position. We are transitioning this plan well ahead of the June 12th resignation date. There was discussion on the timing of this and the complexity of the job, the many projects that the city is going to take on this year, including not doing a transition in the middle of construction season. We felt there was an advantage to putting Jason Anderson into the position in February rather than waiting until later, and having the ability to have Glenn on hand if there are questions. Glenn obviously will be assisting with the transition. I do want to add a couple other points to this recommendation. I believe that, by providing this recommendation to the Personnel Committee, that this is something that the council has desired in terms of transition. And so the recommendation that was put forth to personnel reflects the council's wishes. And secondly, I think for the city council and for the city of Marshall itself, I think this is an effective move to do this. It puts the city in a really good position sooner rather than later. And I think, the job that Jason has done under Glenn since he's been at the city kind of speaks for itself. And he's had some time under Glenn, which has meant that his experience has been valuable and will carry him forward into the new position of Public Works Director. So as stated, the Personnel Committee did accept this the recommendation, and I'll pause here and ask if the Personnel Committee wanted to add any comments to what was stated.
Anything that the Personnel Committee would like to add at this point?
Just, I guess as discussion, Glenn leaves some quite a void in the process, and it's going to take some time to bring anyone on. I think we're very fortunate that we have Jason well on track to take care of this. Like was stated, this is, the changeover is going to occur in the middle of the construction period, but added to that is this is a period of time when we're going through the remodeling of the city hall, and that was going to be an extra load on everybody in the first place. So I think it's a great idea that Glenn is able to take that on and be that liaison with the construction, having a vast knowledge of what that building is, was, and what it will be. So I think that's a very good thing for the city, and this is, there's everybody's concerns and costs all the time, of course, but this is going to be either cost neutral to a cost savings. And I think we're in good shape with Jason being able to step in and take over that role. So this came very, very well recommended. So
I would just add a couple of things. First off, thank you to the Personnel Committee for your work on this, and then thank you. Your work on this really is recognition of the importance of a well thought out succession plan, so that the service will continue to be delivered in an excellent way through this well-planned transition. And I would also say to Glenn, thank you not only for your service to the community for the past 19 years, plus the next 6 months or so, but also working with the recommendations so that there isn't a gap in service. And I'll go back to prior to Glenn being hired as the Public Works Director, when I was obviously mayor then also, and we had a difficult time, because this is a difficult position to recruit for, because it takes, the city engineer has to have excellent technical skills, engineering skills, as Glenn does, but also needs to be a good communicator, as Glenn has over the years, and also needs to be a person who can supervise staff. Glenn has those attributes, Jason has those attributes, but that is not common among a lot of people in their profession. Either they're a good engineer but not a good communicator, or vice versa. And we're blessed that both Glenn and now Jason have those attributes and really have worked with us that will be able to serve the public in a way without that gap in service, without needing to hire a recruiter, which we did need to do prior, and we also had a failed search prior. So lots of things to be thankful for the position that we are in today, as opposed to the position that we were in 20-some years ago. Other input from council, or if there was any other input from the Personnel Committee?
I have a few questions. First of all, is the organizational chart changing?
It is changing slightly, because we're really, because of the community planning department, right now the assistant engineer oversees that department, and with the proposed structure, we're actually looking at having the Public Works Director oversee that department for now.
The reason I'm asking is a few years ago, the council approved a change where we took the assistant engineer and put him in charge of the zoning department or the building department or whatever. And it seems like what we're doing now is changing back to what we had before. And I'm wondering, why is it that we changed it and now we're changing it back?
At the time, I felt that there was a need for the change structurally, and ideally, we would continue to have the same structure, but to bring in an assistant engineer with, which we'll be doing, without that experience in mind, we felt it would be better to maintain some consistency and keep it with Jason Anderson.
So
It
once
could
we,
change back in the future.
so when we have a new assistant engineer, you're going to change back to another change in the organizational charter?
We'll assess the assistant engineer's capabilities at that time.
Okay. The second question I have is, evidently some of the responsibilities that Glenn Olson will now have is supervising the city hall construction. If Glenn were not resigning in June and the situation wasn't occurring the way it is right now, would we go out and hire somebody to do that work for us?
We would use existing staff. We wouldn't hire a city hall owner's rep.
Okay. I guess one of the concerns I have is Glenn is retiring in June, and I guess I'm thinking, why wouldn't it make sense that if he's retiring June 12th, why the new engineer doesn't start June 13th? I mean, normally that's what happens, is when one retires, the other one picks up when that one's employment ends, and it just seems like we're starting the employment of the new city engineer earlier. With my feelings that the best thing in the contract and the agreement should be that the new engineer starts on June 13th instead of in February.
So the question that I would have with that then is, do we wait then until June 13th to advertise and hire the assistant engineer and then run with that gap all summer?
We don't have to.
Well,
Why do
that's
we
what
have
I
to?
think that, well,
I mean, we
because
can
that's,
advertise and start interviewing, even if he's still in the position, and we just have to tell the people that we're interviewing that the position starts on June 13th. We can do that. There's no reason we can't
no
start
transition,
interviewing.
we'd start somebody in cold and have that gap and that stop when we've got probably one of the more significant projects that the city has on something we own since we built Red Baron.
Well, we've had a lot of projects in the past, and we haven't hired additional people to do those projects.
Right, but we
as
had
far as I'm concerned,
known experience in there
or
then too.
knowledge. And the other question I have is this: I'm always concerned about process, and I've worked with Jason a lot in the past. I'm very impressed with the work he's done. I know he's very qualified. I'm just wondering about the process and what we've done in the past. And is that the normal process that we do in the city of Marshall? Is that the normal process that other cities follow? Is that they hire internally, or do they open it up in a search and see if there are other qualified candidates out there?
Yeah, thus far, what I have been doing is taking each vacancy on a case-by-case basis and evaluating the capacity internally for us to promote within. If that capacity is not there, we go out and advertise. We just did that for our EDA director. Although I will tell you, prior to posting for the EDA director, there was an assessment of, is there internal staff that have this capacity to take this on? And there was an assessment by myself that that wasn't the case. So it isn't always that we don't make it available. It is done on a case-by-case basis. In this particular situation, I believe that Jason has the capacity. He's the only one who would be qualified internally, and so there wouldn't need to be an internal search. And I think the big thing here is retaining. It's a competitive job market. Civil engineers, licensed civil engineers can go anywhere, and we want to retain Jason Anderson. We put a lot of investment in him, and he's put a lot of investment in the city of Marshall, so it's a really good move for the city of Marshall to take this action. It is ahead of schedule. Again, we didn't really want to do this transition in the middle of a construction season. And the fact that City Hall is a big project. It is different than other years and not comparable. And Glenn has been doing quite a bit of work on City Hall thus far to get the project going. The council obviously can make this transition any date they want. I recommend that we do this on February 3rd. I think it is a smart move to get Jason Anderson in sooner rather than later.
And there is some precedent for, the internal promotion. The most recent was the public safety director.
Right. And the reason I bring that up is I always want the process to be fair. I want people to feel like when we hire people, we use a fair process, and we're not picking favorites. And that's important that the public know that.
John? Oh, I'm sorry, you have
Well,
one more
with
thing?
regard to Glenn Olson's position now, at the present time, Glenn Olson is the supervisor of Jason. And so when Jason becomes the new city engineer, who does Glenn report to? Does he report to Jason? Does he report to you? And, you know, it's kind of a different situation. So
Yeah.
who is he supposed to report to?
He would report to the city administrator.
John?
One of the things I just add in there that talked about this position also is really Director of Public Works and City Engineer. So the Public Works side is a section that we talked about in personnel meeting that Jason does need to adapt into, as well as, you know, the airport, that side of it. So there is a lot to learn from Jason's side for these various things. So the transition time in here seemed to be very reasonable to do that and not try to crowd that all in a couple of weeks' time or months' time, or just worse yet, dump it on them. Part of that is that it is a good transition. We did talk about, and again, personnel meeting, you know, whether this was just an internal search or whatever, and as we discussed, we've got a person internally that does meet the qualifications, and these are very difficult positions to find, and basically we're fortunate to be in that situation, and really what it comes down to, just be able to look for an assistant engineer at the time, so.
And Craig?
Yeah, and, you know, Glenn, those issues that you brought up, we did discuss a number of those at the, you know, during the Personnel Committee meeting, and one of those considerations, it was the transition that Jason needs to work on, you know, in the Public Works piece, the airport, as John mentioned, and then the time. I think it's going to be tough, and talking to their counterparts with the county, one of their comments was when Glenn's retirement was announced is that, you know, good luck in your search for an assistant engineer. That's a very, very hard position to fill, and it may take us that entire amount of time to find the proper candidate for that. So, I mean, I think that, yeah, the timing might seem a little bit robust for the overlap, but I honestly think that if we're lucky, we'll get that position filled ahead of time and give ourselves a little bit of breathing room. But I think we really need to set ourselves up, the city, to be successful in this transition and to get the best candidates possible.
Thank you, Craig. Jim?
I mean, that brings into my question in Personnel Committee, or Sharon, what is the time frame to fill an assistant engineer position? You said we may have very little overlap, so we may not have an extra employee.
Right.
What is our time frame? What are we
Yep.
looking at?
Right now, the one thing we didn't present to personnel, we weren't ready yet, was we need to do some work on that job description. We did an early revision on that, but more work is to be done. We're hoping as soon as possible we can make those revisions. And as soon as we're complete with that, we would likely post for that position.
So realistically, April,
Probably
That
April,
would be
maybe
optimistic.
early May.
optimistic. So we're not going to have a lot of overlap with extra. And that'd be good. And then it's a good transition, so we're not, then Jason will have somebody young, hopefully young, to guide in, to replace him in 20 years.
Fresh.
Any other input? You know, just for the record, the recommendation then from the Personnel Committee, if we'd restate that.
You want me to restate it? Okay, let me get to it. I didn't print out the packet this week, so I'm gonna get to it. To assign Glenn Olson as a City Hall owner's rep, effective immediately until June 12th, 2020. Appoint Jason Anderson as a Public Works Director effective February 3rd, 2020, and fill the Assistant Engineer position following job description review.
So are there any additional points or questions
I have
about
one
that
more question.
recommendation? Go ahead, Jim.
And the question is, and I'm sure Glenn would be willing to do this, but in his job description, we don't have to put as a, I don't want to say mentor, but that his knowledge is still available to use besides City Hall owner's representative.
Right.
We don't have to dig into that, and I'm sure you would help out, Glenn.
Great.
Perfect. I would make a motion to approve that
I'll
recommendation.
second that.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, in
Yes, Russ.
respect to yourself and the Personnel Committee, is it possible to separate the two, between giving Jason promoting Jason, and then also then have a vote on the assistant engineer?
It is possible, however, that motion on the table would need to be withdrawn at that point.
I'd be fine with that.
Okay.
Are you,
Votes?
is the second willing to withdraw that
Yeah, I'm
second?
fine.
And the reason I'm asking is that it gives the city time to do the job review. If it has to come back to personnel, I mean, hopefully it moves along quickly.
But we're still going to act on the 3 items. We're just going to act on them separately.
Just, you have 3 items, you
Right,
act on
yeah.
the, yeah,
Yeah,
separately.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so Kyle will have, I would entertain up to 3 motions. The first would be to assign Glenn Olson as the City Hall owner's representative effective immediately at June 12th, and to appoint Jason Anderson as a Public Works Director effective February 3rd, 2020.
And I would make that motion.
Motion by Jim,
So I'll second it.
seconded by Craig. Discussion.
Just 2 points here. One about the appointment here. I mean, the next item on the agenda later is the contract, right?
Exactly.
We're going to vote on that. So is the contract and the appointment go together, or?
The appointment would precede the contract.
Okay.
You have to have the appointment, and then you follow up with the contract.
The other issue, or the item I would bring up is this. We talk about transition. We've had transition for a number of years. Jason and Glenn work very closely. Jason knows what goes on in your department. It's not like you're bringing in somebody fresh that never worked with you before or never worked with people, the staff or whatever. I mean, Jason's very informed, so I don't see that there's a need for a big transition here. Like I say, I feel Jason's fully informed as to what goes on in the city of Marshall, and he's very confident. And I just don't see that we need a long transition period to accomplish that.
I think it's important to understand, and this is more philosophical than factual, but this transition, their work focuses are going to change because the function priorities of the city is going to change between now and June 12th. The difference is that until we make this official, how do you go rewrite a position description for somebody who then is currently sitting in that position and then post for it? You have to administratively make the moves in order to add the position. Otherwise, we're basically increasing staff. And then what if we go ahead and do all that, and then somebody withdraws his resignation? You know, until we accept these and move the pieces, you can't do step 3 before you do step 1 and 2.
Any other
Yes,
discussion
I
on the
wouldn't
motion?
agree with that.
Jim?
It also, if we move Jason up to February 3rd, it makes him responsible for the department. You know, now it becomes his department to transition through. And he is now responsible as we go into this new construction season. It's Jason's gig. It's no longer, no offense, Glenn, but it's no longer Glenn's gig.
Right.
And Jason, as February 3rd, is responsible for that department. And-
Anytime you run a critical function in incident command, the most clear thing you do is exchange command. And in that, there's a transition period where the on-duty commander passes the shift over to the inbound. You do an action briefing. You do the exchange of command. You notify the structure of who's in command, and then the outgoing steps back and turns it over. And it's done very deliberately with a specific on and off.
My understanding, I wasn't here, that there was transition time with the finance director, several months, maybe 6.
Yes.
As well as the payroll.
Right.
Clerk. Other discussion on the motion?
I'd like to say that when we make these decisions, and Glenn, you bring up good points, and I appreciate them, but I always let, Sharon and Glenn and Jason do the work. I don't do the work. I can't pretend to do the work and know the work. They do the work. I would think that they would know what is best for them. And yes, we need to give oversight, but I trust that Sharon's doing her job and making that oversight. So I agree with this transition. I think it's a good point and good to think about, but I vote in favor of this.
What would a search cost, just because we've never thrown that, when we did a search before,
In excess of 20,000.
they are in excess of 20, so, okay.
I think the MMU might even be contemplating a search firm right now, right?
Right.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on that motion. Close the voting. And that motion passes. We'll move then to the second motion related to that, and that would be the authorization for staff to refine the position description and post the position to fill for the assistant city engineer position.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion, you'll clarify the language so the word position's not in that sentence 4 times. So,
I only wanted 3 times.
I use the recommendation.
That's,
Discussion, there was some discussion at the Personnel Committee about, do we need an assistant engineer? And the question, again, I don't do the work, I'm not aware of the work, but I know from what Jason said and what Glenn said is that there's definitely a need. So trusting but verifying, I had actually asked them to think about putting hours down and necessity and building those FTEs so we could understand that, so we'd have quantifiable data if the council desires that. So I'm hoping that you guys.
And there's another piece of that too that comes into play, and it's an internal contractual agreement between the city of Marshall and Marshall Municipal Utilities.
Yes.
As to where our engineering department does a lot of services for MMU. And one of the conditions that they did state is, as they became aware that we were contemplating this transition, if we chose not to fill that assistant, they were no longer going to support those positions with $65,000, and that they would go out on their own. So $65,000 of the cost of that assistant engineer is paid directly by MMU back to the city.
and the reason they do that is so they don't have to hire their own, probably commercial firm that would
Right.
do the service, so.
It would be, and that was going to be my comment, that if they did, they still need the work done.
Right.
And this is an inexpensive way in comparison, because otherwise you're going to go out, hire a consultant that bidding each time, and it's going to get to be much more expensive. So in reality, this is a savings to the city.
It's a win-win for both
Using-
parties.
Using biological terms, it's a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
Both
It is,
parties
right.
benefit.
Exactly. I was going to say one more thing, but you trumped it with the
Symbiotic, yeah, that can't beat that one for crying out loud.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. Move then to the next agenda item. This will be consider the employment agreement between the City of Marshall and Jason Anderson as the Public Works Director. Sharon.
Mayor and council, this employment agreement is boilerplate for the city of Marshall. It patterns the recent employment agreement that the city council took action on with the public safety director. Obviously, the term of employment with the start date and salary has been changed, but all other items in the agreement are fairly similar, if not identical, to the public safety director. And it's a recommendation from the city administrator and also the personnel committee to approve this employment agreement.
Anything from the Personnel Committee?
Not really.
Any other questions the council has?
It's my understanding that Jason would be hired at step 4 on the salary schedule, and I'm wondering how it was decided that he would start at step 4 instead of step 3 or 2 or 5 or 6. What went into that decision?
We looked at his current placement, and he's currently on step 6. Let me pull that up here. He's currently on step 6 of the assistant engineer's position, and felt strongly that based on the the responsibilities and duties of the job, and for him to make the move that step 4 would be appropriate for the position that he's taken on. So that was a recommendation as well to the Personnel Committee, and I recommend that in addition.
From a human resource standpoint, do you get into any of the discussion as to what would be the appropriate step for the new hired person to be in?
When we've looked at past promotions within the city, we do look at where the person is positioned with relation to the existing position and the new position, and where the increment is very, very small. We do not, like in Jason's instance, Jason's situation, for instance, if we had moved him to step 2 on the schedule, it would have been the next nearest step without taking a decrease, but it would have only been a 4-cent difference. So that doesn't make sense. So step 3 or step 4 were the options that we had with him, and that resulted in a negotiation between Jason and the administrator, which has been common in the past situations.
Okay, well, I can see the reason for the increase, because of greater job responsibility, and I was just curious as to why you decided that particular step instead of some other step. So, thank you.
Any other questions?
I move approval of the employment agreement between the City of Marshall and Jason Anderson, appointment as Public Works Director.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
Again, I've worked with Jason a lot. I know he's very qualified, very professional, and we're lucky to have somebody like Jason on our staff, and I support the hiring of him, but not at this particular time. I believe, again, that the best thing would be for him to start in June, at the time Glenn's employment ends. So I'll vote against it. Thank
Other
you.
discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion passes. Congratulations, Jason. Congratulations, Glenn. We'll move then to agenda item number 22, consider appointments to various boards, commissions, bureaus, and authorities. Prior to the meeting this evening, the City Council met, interviewed applicants for boards and commissions. Also, prior to our December 17th, the council did meet also and interviewed applicants. And based on both of those special meetings, I make the following recommendations: that on the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Kelly Loft be appointed to his second term, that Ty Brower, Lucas Teets, and Keith Petermeyer be appointed to new terms on the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and for the Merit Center Commission, that Eric Wallen and Joshua Schaefer be appointed to terms on the Merit Center. I offer that as a recommendation. Entertain a motion to affirm.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. Motion passes. Moving then to agenda item number 3, council or commission board liaison reports. The Regional Development Commission did meet this past Thursday afternoon. I was unable to attend because we were interviewing for the Economic Development Authority Director that afternoon, that day, actually all day. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Southwest Amateur Sports Commission met at noon today, and just kind of further discussed where things are at with tournaments. Also looking at, they did make a couple of changes to the ordinance, the order, and added 2 more positions at large, with the thought that there's been a lot of interest from other sport associations, athletic associations within the community that have an interest in looking at opportunities for them, and we thought it was best to look at inclusion. One of the other decisions made is they recognize as permanent seats on Southwest Amateur Sports Commission the Marshall Amateur Hockey Association and the Marshall Amateur Baseball Association. So those two seats are permanent with representatives appointed by their respective boards. And then adding in, there's been interest by a number of other groups in looking at what opportunities are there, and they have ideas to bring forward to add to the experience of sports and athletics and activities within the community. So the board is continuing to work with that. And then, of course, we discussed what one of the actions that we took earlier tonight with MAHA stepping forward with the participation in the new Zamboni and their pride and respect to their commitment to Red Baron and to Southwest Amateur Sports. So I was very positive. That's all I have.
Steve?
Mine have not met, Your Honor.
Glenn?
I have nothing to report.
John?
Mine have not met. A lot of things going on in the EDA, as you mentioned, but I'll let someone else take care of that.
Russ?
Library Board met last night. Eric DeGroat was elected our new president, and Michael Murray, a vice president. And if you haven't been to the library, the electricians have been in there installing the LED lighting that they received a CERT grant from, and what a difference it makes. It brightens up the whole library. The other thing is that Michelle brought forth and I asked Sharon if she was going to present this, but I guess there's some talk about First Amendment audits going around. So we have to be careful, people filming, with video cameras or their telephones and all those type of things. So Michelle just wanted us to be aware of it. We don't think we have a problem, but we didn't think we had a problem with ADA compliance a few years back either. So I think it's a good thing that we should just be aware of it. So I give it just as an informational piece. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Jim?
Mine have not met.
We'll move then to councilmember individual items. Craig Lissar on your end.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Steve?
The only thing I have is that I had previously brought up that we should make our city at 21 for tobacco, but apparently the government agreed with me and the feds did it for us, so we no longer need to worry about that.
They watch our meetings.
They do watch our meetings, and I
Or
take
you
full
have,
credit
Steve.
for that.
Well, thank you, Steve.
And Steve, we did send notice out to all the tobacco sellers that the federal law applies as of the date, the effective date in December. So yes, everybody's on notice of that.
Perfect.
Glenn?
I have nothing.
Jim?
The only thing I have, and it's, maybe you can answer it, Glenn, is we still have that nagging issue out there about the architect miscalculation out at Merit Center. Has that been resolved?
No, we're still waiting for a return.
Okay.
I've
Otherwise,
been contacting them fairly regularly.
okay, thank you. Otherwise, I have nothing.
Russ?
The only thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is with the anticipation of additional snowfall this weekend, I would ask that if the city crews or maybe even utilities, if they could go, if they have time and prior to the snow, go around and open up some fire hydrants, because I tried to do that on the end of my street and that stuff is like concrete. I mean, it's just very, very hard to move, and my snow blower wouldn't even tackle it. So I know it's an ongoing issue that we have around town, but if street department or utilities has a little extra time, I'm sure the fire department would appreciate that, and hopefully they never have to use it, but just in case. That's all I have.
John?
Several things. A couple people stopped me today saying, hey, gee, you got a meeting. Why don't you bring up a couple of things? One is, I have a bad pun, I'm kind of on the fence on, but want to talk about the ability to raise chickens in town. And maybe we should at least address that sometime before spring and have that discussion. Quite a few cities, including Minneapolis, do allow raising chickens in town, or I should say hens in town and not roosters. But, so that may be a topic for discussion. The other one was comment that, gee, when are you going to do the town hall meetings? We thought those were great. I know we have talked about that in the past, and maybe looking at either doing the same method or an alternative that would allow for more attendance, either virtual attendance or whatever, by people with families and things like that. So just, again, bring that up. The other thing, you may have got an email this afternoon on it, but on January 28th, from 11 o'clock to 12:30, State Auditor Julie Blaha will be in Marshall talking about state of the Main Street, listening tour, and trends that face local government. Our city administrator is going to be on that panel discussion, so.
And the mayor, I found out.
Oh, and the mayor, all right, good. So that's going on, so keep that in mind. She's doing a tour around the state and trying to do basically a listening tour, so.
I think also the Lyon County Auditor is on that panel, correct?
Yes.
So I am very comfortable that both EJ and Sharon will be well prepared because.
Then you won't have to. Yeah. We're starting to get that drift of how that works, so, yeah. And then last, just say thank you for the other night, that appreciation dinner to everyone out there. That was a very nice event, and he's no longer here, but congratulations to our Employee of the Year. So I think Preston and the whole event was a very nice event. So thank you for all the work that all the staff did.
And Russ?
Mr. Mayor, I just have one other thing. I had a resident approach me about our city parks and sidewalks, about the amount of ice that is on the sidewalks. And again, we're all aware of it, and we probably have it in our own neighborhoods, but I don't think the city could buy enough salt to salt all the sidewalks in town. But again, it's just, again, when Preston staff has time, they're going to go out and clean them as best as they can, but didn't help to get that inch and a half of rain and then freezing after that. So I talked to City Administrator Hanson about it, and if anybody's got any great ideas, give them to Preston. But again, it's, Dr. Meister probably knows that maybe there's people coming in with hips and broken bones and things like that. So it's just an awareness thing, that's all. Thank you.
Yak tracks, tell them about yak tracks.
There we go.
Is that anything more, John?
No.
I would just mention one thing is, it was actually well publicized. The governor visited Marshall last week, and one of the things he did when he was here was to tour the armory, as well as the need for some upgrades of the armory for not only the function that they have, the people that are working there, really bring it up to current standards. It was built in 1955, and there's just plain some work that needs to be done. While he was also here, one of the other participants was the National Guard Director of Construction, and so he and I had a conversation about long-term, if they're with a facility that was built in 1955, in another 20, 40, 50 years, is that the right location for the armory, or is it not? And so he was real intrigued with that, because they would actually, their true training facilities would need some more space. And so he plans to come meet within the next 2 weeks with myself, as well as engineering staff, and Sharon, and probably our Merit Center director, to look at some long-range planning opportunities. And this is really something that probably needs to be in the planning stage, right? Even though it may not happen for 40 or 50 years. But the planning needs to be done now. We were very encouraged by the governor's assurance that the Marshall Armory project would be included in his bonding recommendation, which I believe comes out tomorrow, or it comes out soon. With that, we'll move to staff reports. Sharon?
Mayor and council, I was just trying to look back last year when we did those town halls. And I don't know, Kyle, if you remember, it seems like we got through winter before having the town halls. So if you do have community members that are asking, we would likely try to hit for that target again. And in addition, the chamber has decided that they'd also like to have the State of the City address again, which is the mayor and I just talking about the prior year and then future goals of the city, and that will take place in March. I'd have to look at the exact date here. I think it's March 4th, actually. So that's another opportunity for the public to be kind of aware of what's happening in the city. Another date in March, which took a little bit of time to get scheduled, was the League of Minnesota Cities training on communication. We did reschedule it from today, actually. It just didn't work out. And we have now tentatively rescheduled that to March 10th. So we'll make sure that we get that on your calendar and remind you about that as well. So we tried to gear it towards Tuesdays. It seems like it's a date that is easier to schedule than other dates. So hopefully that will work out. I do want to also add on dates. Today is actually the date when the pre-development agreement for Block 11 ends, and per the agreement, the city, next step is to be working towards a development agreement with the developer. And that's where we're at today, and our staff, along with Baker Tilly, will be working towards a development agreement with Apex on Block 11. So we've gotten some additional financial information. They've done some additional analysis of the site itself. And we're going to work really hard here in the next few months to get that forward. And hopefully we can see something happening yet this year. So that's just an update on that. It's possible on the 28th, for the next council agenda, we'll have a little bit more details to share with you, or I could probably share more with you. I did mention earlier as well, we did conclude our Economic Development Authority director position interviews. We completed them on Monday. We had a community leadership panel that gave input on who to hire. We had 2 members of the EDA board, as well as the mayor and John DeCramer representing the Personnel Committee, who also sits on EDA. So we did inform the EDA board, who meets tomorrow, that we have made an offer to Lauren Deitz, who's the current Convention Visitors Bureau director, and she is verbally accepted. And she is actually out on leave right now, so likely would not start until April 1. But we will wait, and we'll get her fully up to speed when she comes on April 1st. We're impressed with her commitment to the city of Marshall and the region. She obviously has established credibility for herself with her work with the CVB. And I think she has a level of professionalism and matureness that really will work well when dealing with our business community and trying to bring additional businesses into the community of Marshall. So that is all I had for my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sharon. Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just have a couple of things. One is that I think we have a successful relocation from City Hall to SMSU. They've been really welcoming and friendly to work with, and I hope that we haven't been too disruptive in their operations, but I think that went well. We do have the surplus equipment sale coming up on Friday for those of you that are interested. And now that we're out and the hazardous materials and asbestos person has been able to get into the building and start removal, there were some additional areas that had hidden mastic that need to be removed. And so that will be some additional cost, but you can't really find that until you're into the total destruction and removal. So
they have started they've started the removal?
Yes, they have. They're starting on second floor and then working their way down with the garage area, probably the last. We're still on time and on schedule for the next contractor to come in, but we're keeping track of that timeline as well. And I just want to mention one thing. You know, I didn't intend in this case to stir the pot with my resignation and my retirement, but I did feel it was really important for me and for the city to be able to have additional time, not just 30 days, to look for getting a replacement. So that's why I did give my notice significantly in advance. I know it's a really big job, and I think that we have real good replacement in mind. So, like I said, I didn't intend to stir the pot by going early, but I think it's the best thing for all of us. That's all I have.
Thank you, Glenn. Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A couple of outstanding issues. The sale of city-owned property to MMUA. That was set to close today, but we have an issue with a private easement through the property that has to be resolved. And then Helena is still hanging out there. I have inquired of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture as to the status of the inspection and investigation. They are to provide documents to me. I'm still waiting for that.
With that, we'll move with the remaining items. You have the administrative report, as well as the information items, which includes the building permits and the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything else to come forward this evening?
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to adjourn. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion does pass unanimously. We're adjourned.